There's a lot going on right now with this whole cancel culture thing. Dr. Seuss, the potato people, Pepe Le Pew, Amazon pulling some books, headline after headline that says cancel culture this, cancel culture that, have we gone too far? And I thought, is there a better question here? Where did this term come from? Who's using it? Who's doing the canceling? Are they doing canceling? Is this an us versus them situation, or is this a problem with all of us? After I gave in to my own pathological need to find the context for everything that happens around me, I found out that cancel culture has actually meant two things in its short lifespan of use. And its most popular form is a dirty lie. I do have to point out that in every one of these big headline cases that have happened recently, Pepe Le Pew, Dr. Seuss, the potato people, the changes that happened with these products were initiated by the companies that either control or make those products. This wasn't a response to some overwhelming public outcry or inciting incident, at least not that I can find a record of. I don't really know who to be mad at in this case. The companies for updating their own products to be more in line with current social views on things? I don't think that's cancel culture. I think that's just culture. Culture is always updating itself to be a reflection of the people who are living it. This is how it's always worked. This is probably how it always will work. And in these cases, we have a publishing company that decided not to distribute licenses for books with racist imagery. We have a toy company that decided that slapping genders on a potato makes no sense. And we have an animation studio that decided that a cartoon personification of sexual assault maybe wasn't very good to market to children. So cancel culture isn't the right term here. These things just aren't relevant anymore. Things that it used to be okay to say and do aren't anymore, which is frankly great. Do a little research on where the term Jim Crow comes from, and you'll see what I mean when I say some changes are good things. Dropping an F-bomb on live TV could cost you up to $325,000 and maybe jail time back in the Puritan days of 2006. Now, we don't consider that to be such a big deal. Today, there's a different word that carries even greater consequences for its casual use. And yet, there was a time that that word was used pretty casually. One word was considered to be obscene for fairly arbitrary reasons. I don't actually know why. F***'s a bad word. Oh right, no, because it has to do with sex, and like sex is bad or something. But the other word is banned because it was a demeaning term used by a racist to refer to an entire people group who they had enslaved at one point, and then horribly oppressed for another century or so after that, and counting. So in that light, we've moved from a culture that was attaching consequences to saying a word that means everything and nothing, but probably had something to do with sex, so like just, it's offensive, trust us, to a culture where consequences are attached for demeaning other people groups who have a demonstrated history of being marginalized, subjugated, and persecuted. Both those words were banned in recent history, but only one of those words actually references real-world harms and refers to real-world victims. How our culture continues to shift is a conversation we absolutely should be having, though using at least this example, it does look like we're moving in the right direction. But there's another recent situation that is a little more political. It has to do with Amazon pulling a book from its marketplace. That book was When Harry Became Sally, a book that uses junk science and opinion to bash transgendered people. I can see how Amazon might be like, nah. Having a conversation about Amazon's market share and control of the market, and whether that constitutes censorship or suppression of ideas, that's a conversation we can have. But there's a problem with applying the term cancel culture to this situation. Nothing was canceled. You can still buy that book from its publisher. In fact, bunches and bunches and bunches of people are. In light of the sales numbers that have followed the controversy with Dr. Seuss and this other book, I'm sure there are a lot of authors out there who would love for Amazon to cancel their book. But this is that whole freedom of the market thing that I keep hearing about from kind of the same people. Even if Amazon had been the sole publisher of this book, there's nothing stopping the author from starting his own publishing company. And the people who are riled up about this being cancel culture are the same people who constantly advocate free market solutions to everything. If you're concerned that Amazon has so much power over the publishing industry that it can control the cultural narrative of our society, probably market reform, regulation, and antitrust laws are what you're looking for. Again, this isn't so much a case of cancel culture as it is, this book says terrible things about an entire group of people. Do we really want to put our name on that? It's bad PR and getting sued is a pain in the ass. Culture. But this fits into a broader narrative, the perception that big tech is perpetrating some sort of vengeful pogrom against conservative or right-wing thought. Upon inspection, this isn't super accurate. You can go buy Mein Kampf on Amazon right now, Kindle edition if you want to. Here's the thing about Twitter or Amazon or Facebook or pretty much any other online platform. All of them have terms of service or user license agreements which delineate the rights of the user and the rights of the service provider. Posts or products that involve hate speech or show the support of violence or make any threats, etc., are almost always limited on these sites. A social media company acting to police the posts of its users is certainly within their rights, but I can see how that would be disconcerting. Keep in mind that a lot of countries regulate media coverage just before an election, usually to ensure equal broadcast time or to do thorough fact-checking. The laws and regulations that surround the BBC in the UK are particularly interesting. You should go look them up. But Facebook and Twitter aren't news. Or they weren't, anyway. But then we built our little safe space echo chambers and started reporting to each other what we thought we knew about whatever it was that was going on at the time, which is in no way exactly like a rumor mill, or at all vulnerable to manipulation or abuse. Then social media companies took some heat, and rightly so, in the 2016 election, when it came out just how influential and manipulated those sites were. Then January 6th happened at the Capitol, after 6 weeks of a sitting president blatantly lying his ass off in order to illegally stay in office. In response to those lies and that event, Facebook decided it would increasingly limit posts that describe political violence and added factual links to posts that contained falsehoods about politics or the election. Again, those posts are almost never deleted. In other words, you can still state your opinions as fact on Facebook. You can say, this thing about candidate XYZ is true. The post will stay up, it's just it might later contain a link that shows that you prefer to believe things that are contrary to facts and reality. This was an incredibly complicated situation that should have never happened, but again, I find it a bit hard to justify portraying all this as the result of cancel culture. I think election year and domestic terrorism are the more apt terms. So why do we keep hearing about this? Where did cancel culture come from? The label, not as a culture. Though, now that I think about it, I do seem to recall several groups of people in the past who would go into libraries and censor books that they found to be immoral. Or they would boycott a company because they removed the word Christmas from their coffee cups. There was also that one time that they called for all the Harry Potter books to be banned because they contained witchcraft. And also something Dungeons and Dragons something demon worship. As if loner kids who like to use their imagination and paint models didn't have enough to worry about in the 80s. You modern nerds have no idea how good you have it. All of that kind of sounds like a culture that likes to cancel things it doesn't agree with. So what happened to those folks? Oh, they're now the ones who are accusing everyone else of being part of some hypersensitive cancel culture. That's confusing. Look, we're really talking about two different things here. One is the phenomena wherein some public figure or company does or says something subtly or blatantly racist, homophobic, or perverse, to which the public reacts by heaping scorn or shame on that person or company. This reaction may or may not result in that person losing their public position or in consequences for a company. Public scandal is a thing, and our lives are lived more and more in public all the time. The nature of this phenomenon, its dangers, and how to deal with it are all great topics for further discussion. When this phenomenon first showed up in the media, it was called call-out culture. The conversation around call-out culture needs to be around how much public shame is okay. What consequences should someone suffer for screwing up in public? But now we talk about this phenomenon under the heading of cancel culture as well. Then there's the second way that cancel culture is used. The thing is, because of nifty internet tools, you can actually see when cancel culture, the term, was born, and where call-out culture got mixed up with it. Call-out culture became cancel culture right about the time we started having a national debate about removing Confederate monuments. Statues and icons loudly defended as simple markers of culture and heritage. Don't let them cancel your culture, was the cry, to paint the picture of victimization at the hands of an overly sensitive and overreacting them. Its second definition is by far the more common use today. It's used to invalidate the concerns of others whom you don't agree with, and it's a term that doesn't fit recent actions by companies self-reflecting on their older products, companies which have decided to remove older products that reflected an outdated or ignorant worldview, or to update other products to continue their cultural relevance. It's a term that didn't fit well when it was used to talk about Facebook or Twitter flagging election conspiracy posts by posting links to accurate information. And it's a term that didn't fit well when it was used to describe people calling for the removal of Confederate monuments, many of which were put in place to enshrine a false historical narrative and to perpetuate an oppressive social order. It turns out cancel culture is not a great label for anything that exists out in the real world, except cancel culture. It is a term that most accurately describes the people using it. Discussions about the rights of individuals and businesses as they relate to speech and action will continue to be an essential cultural conversation. When do you as a society act to protect the few from the many? When do you protect the many from the few? And that complex topic should not be reduced to a two-word catchphrase, which finally lays bare the real story of cancel culture, how it's used now. It's a simple label attached to complicated issues by a culture that benefits from division. And the only thing that's canceled are those meaningful conversations that let us move forward.